What's up, YangGang? We're out here working hard. We're getting Mama's vehicle ready, y'all. Cause y'all know the story. We have to be out of this house. I don't even know when. He just said as soon as possible for his family to move in. So what we're out here doing is we're trying to downsize, y'all. We're gonna downsize to just the Ghost Mobile. Now we gotta get rid of those bumper stickers. Actually, we think we're gonna send those bumper stickers along. If they want to take them off, they can take them off. But we're gonna try to yank whoever buys it first.
Yes, he is 100% serious.
What's up, YangGang? So we're on our way right now to get the Mama's vehicle cleaned up so that we can sell it. Because we're having to move on short notice and we're having to downsize. Oh, what I got on my face?
You got something on your face. This clip is from the first speech that Andrew Yang gave in South Carolina in Hilton Head at the electrical co-op or something.
Yes, electrical co-op.
Yeah. Thank you. Shout out new Patreon.
New Patreon.
Thank you.
And to all of you who have donated, bless you, thank you. It means the world to us.
Yes. Special shout outs to y'all. I don't know if you want us to say your name, so we're just going to say thank you. You know who you are.
You know who you are. And you know what? Listen, when y'all donate and stuff, if we can like send you like a Broke Folk Boat t-shirt or bumper stickers, or let us know, y'all. Because we want to be able to return the love. Because, you know, we love y'all just as much as y'all love us. I promise you. But anyway, enjoy the video. There may not be any bloopers. You got all the bloopers you needed with this little dude back here mocking everything that we say.
I'm going to steal your line. See you on the next one, YangGang.
See you on the next one, YangGang.
Thank y'all for coming out. I appreciate you. I love the hats, fellas. I love those hats. All right, so as the gentleman up here was talking about, well, first off, my name is Jermaine Johnson. I'm the South Carolina campaign chair for Andrew Yang. So if y'all need to reach out to somebody for the campaign, it would be me. I'm sure y'all probably, some of y'all have already heard from me. I've called people. I've been making cold calls and Facebook and social media and all different types of things. Anyway, so like the gentleman has said up here, they're talking about respecting their elders and yielding time to the elders and all that. I am also a big proponent of respecting my elders. So if we have some young gentlemen in here who can please give up their seats to some of these elders that we have in this room, I would greatly appreciate it sitting around on the side. We have chairs. We have 5 or 6 seats up here. We got some seats over here. But anyway, I'm going to give you all a little bit about myself. Again, I'm the South Carolina campaign chair for Andrew Yang. I went to the College of Charleston. Anybody know what College of Charleston is? Anybody a fan of the basketball team at College of Charleston? I was one of the players on the College of Charleston basketball team. I played for College of Charleston from 2004 to 2009. I played for the great Bobby Crimmins. I'm sure y'all know Bobby Crimmins. He lives out here with y'all. I called him this morning to see if he was going to get out here, but he said he was playing golf on the green. Couldn't get him out here. So anyway, he'll be out for the next one. But I appreciate you all coming on out here. You know, we were really appreciative to have you all here. I've been ripping and running up and down the state. We're trying to get Andrew to stay here. We want him to move to South Carolina, right? We want to get him here. But the Southern White House. Yeah, we're going to get him the Southern White House down here. So we're going to give Andrew a few minutes just to pitch his vision, pitch his dream for all of us as a country, but not only us as a country, but for down here in the low country, because we do not want to be forgotten about down here. Like I said, I went to College of Charleston, I never left. I got here in 2004, and I've been down here. When I first got down here, I saw a whole bunch of trees, and I come from College, trees everywhere. And when you look at the tree, they said make it right at the big red oak. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So you guys use trees as landmarks, and where I'm from, I use actually street signs. So it's different. But anyway, so we want to again say thank you all for coming on out here. We all want to accept you all as part of the YangGang, honorary members of the YangGang, and we're going to give.
Let's go, YangGang.
I'm going to give the floor to our our next president, Mr. Andrew Yang.
Yeah!
It's such a pleasure. This is my first time in Hilton Head.
All right.
Welcome. So you can infer from that, I do not golf. Tennis. Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Yang. I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020. And I am going to be honest, I'm the last person anyone thought was going to run for president. In terms of my high school, my upbringing, my parents were not like, you're going to be president someday. If you hadn't noticed, I'm Asian. You listen to something like doctor, engineer, lawyer, maybe, and it stops there. So I was an attorney in New York City. I left to start a company that didn't work out. How many of you all have started a business or organization? It is so hard, am I right? And the worst part is whenever anyone asks you how it's going, what do you say? Great. It's going great. No one ever wants to hear that it's not going great. They're like, it's going great. So my first business did not work out. But then I kept at it. I worked for another technology company, and then I became the head of an education company that grew to become #1 in the United States. Was acquired by a public company in 2009. In 2009, this was the wake of the financial crisis, and I thought I had a sense as to what had gone wrong. And it echoes some of the things that Carlton was saying and Alex was saying about the way our economy has taken shape. And we had so many whiz kids heading to Wall Street that had crashed the economy, and I thought, what a train wreck. Like, we need those people. We need our talent and energy doing things that will actually create jobs and create value around the country. So I quit my job. I donated some money to start a nonprofit. You're all working a nonprofit or on the board of a nonprofit? Yeah, so you know what that is too. So started a nonprofit that trained entrepreneurs to create jobs in places like Detroit, Birmingham, New Orleans, Cleveland, Baltimore, around the country. Spent 7 years building this organization. I was honored by the Obama White House for helping to create thousands of jobs. And I had never seen a lot of these parts of the country. I was blown away by the disparities between Birmingham and San Francisco, or St. Louis and Manhattan. I felt like I was traversing dimensions and ways of life more than a few time zones. And I know, I have a sense of the economy of this region. Like, many people here are retiring, they made money in other parts of the country, and then they come here with significant levels of savings. But you will understand what's going on in other parts of the country. Many of you might have worked in financial services or in the Northeast. And so you come here, many of you have kids. How many of you are parents like me? My house, so many parents in this room. So I saw for the first time really the disparities between different parts of our economy. And then Donald Trump became our president in 2016, which to me was a giant red flag. Now I know there are people here who voted for Donald Trump. There are many people that support my campaign that supported President Trump. And to me, the big explanation that no one seemed, if you turn on cable news right now and try to figure out why Donald Trump won, like what would cable news tell you? WikiLeaks, Russia, WikiLeaks, Facebook, FBI, Electoral College, bigotry, racism. So those are the explanations that we've gotten from cable news. And note that no one in cable news actually thought he'd win. But now that he won, then that's the set of explanations we have. But I looked at the numbers, and there's one very, very clear driver of his victory. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, tens of thousands right here in South Carolina. That's one reason why Jermaine came to work on the campaign, as he saw that we were blasting away manufacturing jobs here in South Carolina at very high levels. And if you look at the voter district data, there's actually a positive correlation on a district-by-district level between the adoption of industrial robots in a district and the movement towards Donald Trump. One of the strongest correlations anyway. So, as you can tell, I'm a numbers guy. And so I was going through the numbers in 2017, and I said, wait, this is a straight economic technology story. And like Carlton said, the technology we're talking about is about to take off. You know, you talk about these machines in the factories, that's just a half of it. And I'm going to go into that in a sec. Actually, I'll go into it now. It's fun. So, what are the 5 most common jobs in the U.S. economy by category? Truck driving is number 4. Retail is number 2. Food service is number 3.
Construction.
Manufacturing is number 5, and number 1 is always tricky to guess. Number 1 is clerical and administrative, which includes call centers. About half of American jobs fall into one of those 5 categories. Now, when you call a customer service line and get the software, what do? You dial 000 and say human into the line. And then you get the human, you're like, oh, thank goodness. In 2 to 3 years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It's going to be very seamless and effective and delightful. You might not even know it's software. What's that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers for a living right now that make $14 an hour? After that software gets to a point where, and you don't need genuine artificial intelligence to do a customer service job. You just need a very good decision tree and a bunch of micro conversation elements. How many of you noticed stores closing on main streets or malls closing? Been in a mall that's better days are behind it? 30% of America's malls and stores are closing in the next several years. And why is that?
Amazon.
Amazon's soaking up $20 billion in business every single year, closing 30% of American stores and malls. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year?
0.
So think about that math. Sorry?
And how do they treat their people?
Yeah, they treat their people. I have friends who work at Amazon, and they say they're very open about the fact that you're trying to automate your own job away. That's the culture there. So 20 billion gets sucked up out of your communities. 30% of the stores close. Most common job in America is being a retail clerk or cashier. The average retail worker or cashier is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $10 an hour. So when that store closes, what's her next move going to be? How many of you have seen self-serve kiosks at a fast food restaurant or one of those? Like McDonald's is rolling them out in every location in the U.S. And truck driving is the one that, to me, is beyond disastrous. Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, including this one. 3.5 million truckers, 94% male, average age 49. Tens of thousands of them are ex-military. Now, my friends in Silicon Valley are working on cars and trucks that can drive themselves. And they're doing it for the money. $168 billion per year in estimated labor savings from automating away truck driving. That's an unfathomable amount of money. So if you're a professional investor in Silicon Valley and I come to you and say, hey, I've got an idea that I think can help get rid of truck drivers, I need 500 million, 800 million, $1 billion to do it, you make that bet. You say, all right, I've done the math, and this, if you have even this chance of pulling it off, then that's the right bet to make. So they could get billions of dollars, and what do? They hire hundreds of the smartest engineers in this country. And they tell me that they are 98% of the way to self-driving trucks right now. Now, 2% is a very big gap. You can't have trucks smashing into things. And they're very, very bad at something called snow. Because the trucks need to see the road markings on the highways, and when snow covers those markings, the computer is not sure what to do. Yeah, believe it or not, if you're a truck driver, you're like, come on, snow.
All the time.
So the way they think they can get to the last 2%, you all remember the first time you watched TV on your cell phone? Remember that? And then I remember having the same reaction. I was like, wow, we do that now? It's like, oh, a sports highlight. It's actually good. So we're right now equipping our infrastructure with 5G, which is like the next level of bandwidth speed. And so the plan to get the last 2% of truck driving is to have teleoperating equipment on the truck so that if the computer's not sure what to do because the weather is bad, then a teleoperator will beam in from Nevada or Arizona and take over the truck because they'll have cameras on the front of the truck, so it'll look like a video game. So just like you beam in, then you drive it for a little while, and then the computer says, hey, I'm all set again, and then you beam back out. What do you think the ratio is going to be between teleoperators in Nevada and the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living right now? Maybe like 2%, 3%? And this doesn't even take into account the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, motels, diners, and retail establishments that the truckers get out of every day to have a meal. Because if you're a trucker, you can't drive for more than 14 hours a day. Your truck actually will stop you from driving, and so you have to get out to take a nap and get a meal and the rest of it. So if you are a trucker and you see this unfolding, only 13% of truckers are unionized. 87% mom and pop small businesses. So if you are hoping that there's some collective bargaining negotiation, there is none. Again, this is vastly dominated by individual truckers who've taken out loans to buy a truck or two, and then they've hired a few drivers. That's what this industry looks like. How do you think those truckers will respond when the robot trucks start hitting the highways and don't stop? Yeah, it's going to be worse than a strike, I believe. They just recently did something called a slow roll in the Midwest, where they started just driving slowly on the highway, like a dozen trucks. Everyone was like, why is traffic going so slow? They were protesting the digital monitoring of their driving time. What do you think the reaction is going to be if it's a robot truck that threatens their livelihood? No, so this is 5 to 10 years away, is what they tell me. Amazon's testing out robot trucks on the highways right now. So we're 5 to 10 years away from disruption of the most common job in 29 states. This is the reality, and I was an unhappy attorney for 5 months. You can automate that job too. That's a joke, but this is just meant to broaden the discussion, because like Carlton said, you're looking at 40 to 44% of American jobs that are either repetitive manual or repetitive cognitive. So repetitive cognitive is things like accounting and bookkeeping, a lot of insurance agent and brokerage, pharmacists, a lot of that is monitoring different drug interactions and data. And being an attorney, artificial intelligence can outperform even the most skilled attorney at contract editing in terms of speed and accuracy and cost. The AI does not charge you $200 an hour. You know what I mean? So this is the buzzsaw that is now hitting us. We're in the third inning and it gave us Donald Trump. And for whatever reason, our politicians either don't want to talk about it or don't understand it. This is what got me off the sidelines and into politics in 2017. So I did the research, I had the facts and figures, I wrote a book, like I have a PowerPoint deck, and I went to Washington, D.C., and I sat down with people saying, hey, we're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in our country's history, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. What are we going to do? And what do you think the folks in Washington, D.C. said to me when I asked them, what are we going to do?
Can't talk about it.
So the three most popular responses I got, actually the only responses I got, were number one, we can't talk about that. Number two, we should study that further. And number three, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Which sounds halfway responsible. You're like, okay, well, I'll set that. Like, you know, so I'm familiar with this. Just like, okay. So then I said, look, I dug into the studies on how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs in the Midwest and the South. You all want to guess how effective those programs were? Yes, YangGang, thank you. 0 to 15%. They're largely ineffective, almost entirely ineffective. In reality, if you look at the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs, almost half of them left the workforce and never worked again. And of that group, about half filed for disability. And then you saw surges in drug overdoses and suicide in these communities. How many of you all studied economics in college? I'm sure there are people. So our economics textbook said that if you automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs, they get retrained, reskilled, move, higher efficiency. It did not say that they would go home, drink a lot, start killing themselves at record levels and vote for Donald Trump. But on this one, you have to listen to the real world and not the textbook. And so if that's what happened to the manufacturing workers, I'm going to suggest that something similar or worse will play out with the truckers. So DC is not up to it at all. And there's one person in DC who said something that brought me here to you all today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. Because this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And no one here will do anything about this unless you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring it crashing down on our heads. And I heard this and I said, challenge accepted. I can do that. And then I started running for president a little while later. And I'm here with you today as one of the 9 candidates who's qualified for the fall debate stage.
Yeah.
Now, how am I doing so well? It's because Americans recognize the truth when they hear it. Americans know what's going on in their main streets. They know that the engineers in Silicon Valley are following the almighty dollar. They know that corporate incentives make it that you can actually be fired if you don't replace your call center workers with artificial intelligence. Like, we know how our system works. Carlton called for like a moral approach to business. I've run businesses, and I consider myself like a decent human being. So when I had the choice, I said, look, let's give our people health care. Let's give people raises. Let's treat them well. But the corporate incentives do not cut that direction. The corporate incentives are to make everyone a contractor, gig worker, say, you're not an actual full-time employee, let's not give you health care. Like, that's where all the incentives work. I was able to do what I did because my business was thriving and growing, and I was employing a certain sort of person. But I was going against the grain the whole time, and we all know it. Like, we pretend that it's up to the business leader to quote-unquote do the right thing when the system says the right thing is going to get you fired. The right thing is going to have you get replaced pretty shortly. So this is the set of problems we have as a country right now. We're in the midst of this economic transformation. DC doesn't want to touch it. So what are we going to do? The first time you heard anything about me, you heard something like this. There's a guy running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000. And the first time you heard that, you were like, ha ha, this is a gimmick, right? Like, this is literally too good to be true. But this is a deeply American idea embedded in our DNA. Thomas Paine was for it at our founding, called it the Citizens Dividend. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 1960s, called it a guaranteed minimum income. 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, endorsed it in the 70s. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. And then 10 or 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Alaska.
How do they pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Technology, that's right. It recently just came out that data has a higher market value than oil right now. And that's just data. That doesn't take into account autonomous vehicles and the Internet of Things and all of the other innovations that are coming down the pike. If just our data is worth more than oil right now, imagine what it would look like if Amazon wasn't paying zero in taxes. Google, Facebook, Uber, all these companies are expert at not paying a whole lot of taxes. And again, it's just our system. So you can imagine the accountants meeting with Jeff Bezos, in Seattle. Being, hey Jeff, great news, another year of zero taxes. Because this is not unusual. Like, their lifetime tax rate is 3%. They go between like 0 and 5, typically. So they come in, they say, hey Jeff, great news, 0%. Then what does he do? He goes into his vault, he gets giant, sacks of cash and says, nice job, and gives it to them, and then they all walk out there, I mean, that's our system, that's their job. It's their job to minimize the tax burden of Amazon. They're very good at their job. You know who's terrible at our job? The government. How do we create a system where Amazon's paying less in taxes than everyone in this room? Does that make any sense to anybody? No. So if we give the American people a sliver, tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, and eventually every robot truck mile and every artificial intelligence work unit, then we can afford a dividend of $1,000 a month very, very quickly. This is the trickle-up economy, particularly because we know where the money would go. After I'm president, thank you, South Carolina. President, and the money starts flowing here to you all in Hilton Head. Where does the money actually go in real life? $1,000 a month for every American adult.
Rent, food, mortgage and rent.
Mortgage, rent, clothes,
Car.
student loans, car repairs, daycare, electric bills. Hey, how much of it stays right here in your community?
Almost all of it.
Most all of it. Some of it would float away, but most of it would be here. It would go to the local business owners. It would make it so that if you were a tutoring service, then you hire an extra tutor. If you're a bar, you hire another server. Like a lot of the jobs would just get created right here. It would create tens of thousands of jobs in South Carolina communities and starts to build an economy that actually revolves around us and what we want our future to be, because if we let the market determine our value, it's going to zero out more and more of us very, very quickly. And it's not just the truckers, it is the accountants, the radiologists, it's all these, and in the danger zone we're in right now, is that the response is going to be to run to the government and say, hey, my job is special. You know what I mean? The doctors are doing that right now. The doctors, no offense to the doctors, I mean, you know, it's rational. But the doctors are like, hey, I don't care if the software can read the radiology film better than the radiologist. You still have to have a human radiologist look at it, because humans are special. So that might work for the radiologist for like a particular period of time, but then there are other groups that have zero lobbying power, like the retail clerks. Do you think the retail clerks are like, hey, I don't care if the self-checkout will work? Like, you need a human to check the person out because humans are special? Of course not. So the danger then is that we end up with this political jockeying for protection, where certain powerful classes will be able to go to the government and get some level of protection from automation, and then others of us will not. That is the race to the bottom we're in the midst of, that we're about to enter. This is the race to the bottom. And what we have to do is we have to rethink the way we see our own value in the society. Why is it that it was mainstream political wisdom in the 60s and 70s that would just guarantee everyone a dividend or a certain amount of money? Whereas now, it takes the outsider presidential candidate to make the case. Like, what the heck happened in those 50 years? Some of you are old enough to remember, in part. But what happened in those 50 years is we all got collectively desensitized and brainwashed into thinking that we're all economic inputs. That if you don't have economic value, then you have no value. That they're the same thing. Like, that conflation, that confusion threatens to destroy us. Because if we cling to it too long, we're going to follow our economic measurements off the cliff. Now, what do I mean by that? So GDP is at record highs. You know what else are at record highs right now?
Suicides.
Suicides, drug overdoses, anxiety, depression. Our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years as a country. You all want to know the last time American life expectancy declined 3 years in a row?
Spanish
Civil War.
Spanish flu of 1918. The pandemic that killed millions. Like, you have to go back that far. America's in Spanish flu territory right now, and most people don't even know it because we're following GDP. Self-driving trucks are going to be great for GDP, but they're going to be terrible for a lot of people. You know, so what's happening right now is the measurements are diverging from our own well-being. So how do you change that? How many, again, raise your hand if you run a business or an organization. Imagine if you had the wrong measurements. Like, how's that business going to do? You'd be really badly. Right now, the three measurements we use to figure out how we're doing: number one, GDP; number two, stock market prices; and number three, headline unemployment. Those are the big three. GDP, gross production, is not going to take into account inequality or the fact that machines can do a lot of this work for us. Stock market wealth, I know there are a lot of stock owners in this room, but the bottom 80% of Americans own only, I think it's 8% of stock market wealth. Bottom 50% of Americans own essentially zero. So if you look at the stock market, you're essentially tracking the fortunes of the top 20% of Americans. And headline unemployment doesn't take into account people that are working several jobs, that are underemployed, or that stop looking. Right now, America's labor force participation rate is 63%, the same levels as El Salvador and Costa Rica. Wow. And this is year 10 of an expansion. How the heck did that happen? You had hundreds of thousands of unskilled men in particular leave the workforce and get discouraged. And men in particular deal with idleness very poorly. Women are actually okay with idleness in the sense you're never actually idle. Like, get involved with various projects, volunteer, go back to school. Unemployed men volunteer at lower levels than employed men. Think about that for a second. A lot more time, and yet they'll volunteer less. Unemployed men tend to atrophy their... Sorry, distracted. Technology. Anytime something like that happens, I'm always like, it's the Russians.
Airplane mode, everybody.
So men deal with unemployment in very unproductive ways. Alcohol consumption goes up, volunteerism goes down, and then they spend the vast majority of the time on the computer. So these are not things that end up leading in positive directions. And unfortunately, Like, so this is something that diverges pretty clearly along gender lines. And this is one of the reasons why our labor force participation rate is so low, and it's a massive underreported story in this country. We're cheerleading these statistics that are less and less meaningful, and then if you dig under the rock, there's all of this weakness, there's all of this suffering. Financial insecurity, 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, almost half can't afford an unexpected $400 or $500 bill. And so you have this mindset of scarcity and insecurity that has swept our country. And studies have shown that if you can't pay your bills, it's like a bandwidth tax. And we've all been here in some form. If it's not money, it can be time, it can be food, it can be companionship. Like when you start feeling short of stuff, it actually makes your decision making worse. Studies have shown that this mindset of scarcity has the functional impact of decreasing your IQ by 13 points, or 1 standard deviation. So if you think America is getting less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, less forward-looking, we are. Because we've introduced pervasive financial insecurity. And then what happens? People start looking at it and being like, if you're doing better, then that's bad for me, and then you start turning on each other. Start becoming susceptible to really bad ideas and bad leadership. So this is how it's all tied together, and unfortunately the trends are about to take off. I just spoke to a group of 70 large company CEOs in New York City, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at using AI to get rid of a lot of your back office workers? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All of them, yeah. So this is just now leaving the lab and hitting the businesses. We have to get our acts together as a country really, really quickly. And $1,000 a month, this trickle-up economy, what does it mean in real life? It's about everything but the money. It's about our health, our mental health, our relationships, our stress level, our ability to do the sort of work that we want to do. And it values the sort of work that my wife does. My wife is at home right now with our 2 young boys. One of them is autistic. What is the market value of her work at right now? Zero. And we know that's nonsense. We know the work she's doing. So I was off the trail and with my kids for a day or two, Hey, we saw that virtually everyone here is a parent. Like, parenting is such hard work. We value that at 0. Even the inventor of GDP said we should include parenthood and motherhood because it's so important. We, of course, ignore it. He also said we should never use GDP as a measurement for national well-being, which we also ignored. And we've had this measurement for 100 years. So as your president, one of my first orders of business, because it's so easy, is I can go down the street to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, look, GDP is an old measurement, it's out of date, we're going to update it. So how are we going to update GDP? How can we measure things that actually matter to you all here in South Carolina? Like, what would you want me to add to GDP to make it more meaningful?
Less carbon in the atmosphere.
Environmental quality, yeah, we can do that. We have a number for that, and we can...
Minimum wage.
Affordability. Now, what good is this GDP number if the top slice of the population just keeps on hoovering up more and more of the gains?
The ability to get a good education.
Childhood success rates and education levels. Health and well-being, life expectancy, that one seems pretty basic to me. It's like your life expectancy is going down, it's probably not a good sign. Mental health and freedom from substance abuse, that would be key. We have so many Americans who are struggling on one of those dimensions right now. Funding for the arts, arts and culture. Yeah. How much more arts and culture would we have in a country where everyone had their $12,000 a year?
A lot.
A lot. How much of that would flow to nonprofits, religious organizations? So much. Volunteerism, like we can actually supercharge our culture in a real way. All it takes is the will of the people. All it takes is enough of us coming together and saying, the Asian man is talking sense. So this is what starts out, I know the first time you heard it, you say like, wow, that actually sounds far out. But now hopefully it seems like a necessary move that would be incredibly invaluable to build a trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. We can do it. All it takes is enough of us getting together. And as president, the Democrats and progressives will be so psyched to beat Donald Trump, they'll be like, yes, we made the right bet. Let's pass that dividend. Children and families are on board. But then the Republicans and conservatives will be like, wait a minute, I don't mind this. The state that had this the state that has this right now is a deep red conservative state. It was passed by a Republican government. What do conservatives hate? They hate large bureaucracies making everyone's decisions for them. They don't mind the freedom dividend. This is about empowering individuals, going to increase the number of jobs. They don't mind it. I don't need 80% of Congress. I just need 51%. So then you pass the dividend. America looks up and it's like, wow, we did it. Like we did something right, the government did something I'm excited about, and then we can start trying to solve other problems too. One of my unique features as a candidate is I'm almost entirely non-ideological. I just want to solve the problems. I can work with anyone at any point in the political spectrum. So the goal is to try and reorient our gridlock in Washington around solving the real problems of this era. And we can get people on both sides of the aisle excited about the dividend. Heck, the Freedom Dividend, it's named after the libertarians. That's a joke. we tested a series of names for it, and then Freedom Dividend tested the best. Because I'm a numbers guy. Tested all names, that was the winner. Very, very clearly, by the way. It wasn't even close. So this is how I'm here with you all today, is that if you talk sense to the American people get it. The American people know that 80% of the manufacturing jobs lost were due to technology, automation, and robots, and not immigrants that were scapegoating immigrants, something they have nothing to do with. Americans know that our government has now fallen decades behind the curve at solving our real problems, and that plowing money into institutions that haven't worked for us for years will not help us now. The best thing we can do is actually put the resources into our own hands and start making our families and our communities stronger. So this is the campaign to put humanity first, to start building an economy around our needs and values by getting off these 20th century frameworks and into an economy that will work for us in the 21st century. I can't tell you how much fun it's been to be running here in South Carolina. I haven't been here enough, but I love it here. I come down here, and you all understand that there's so much common sense in this state. It's wonderful. I found that talking to voters is the most valuable thing I can do. And the YangGang, which some of you are members of, I appreciate. We just said we raised over $3 million this quarter, and the average donation is only $24. So my fans are even cheaper than Bernie's. This is an entirely people-powered campaign. This is just the will of the people manifest. I'm not beholden to any corporate overlords. Though Elon Musk did just endorse me this week.
Let's go, Elon.
Because a lot of the people who are at the forefront, I'm going to list for you all like the top occupations of donors to the YangGang. Number 1 is software engineer. Number 2 is teachers. Yeah. Number 3 is retail workers. Number 4 is drivers. And number 5 is people who work in fulfillment centers. Those are the top 5. So I'm going to suggest to you all that everyone in that list is very close to the action. They understand what's happening, and so when I come out here, the software engineers aren't like, oh, he's wrong. Software engineers are like, oh, he's right. That's why Elon Musk is like, I co-sign. Jack Dorsey, I co-sign. Sam Altman, like all the leading technologists are like, yeah, that's right. So we need to take this vision, this case to the rest of the country as fast as possible. And that's why I'm here with you all in South Carolina, because this is how you create a wave. You get the people of South Carolina behind something and the wave swoops the country. You all are so powerful this way. It's amazing. Do you know how many Californians each South Carolinian is worth? About 500. So you look at this room, what are there? 100 people, maybe 200 people here? It's called 200. That's 10,000 Californians. This is about half a football stadium. That is the power of this environment. That's why I'm not the first, nor will I be the last presidential candidate that comes. But we need your help. Your country needs your help. We have to start trying to solve the real problems of this era before it's too late. Because if we wait another 4 years, AI gets smarter, self-driving trucks get closer to the highways, more stores close, more Americans become pushed to the side and marginalized, and our ability to solve these problems will only get lower. So thank you all so much. It is not left, it is not right, it is
forward.
I'm gonna allow Mr. Yang up here to kind of
I'm self-moderate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's gonna self-moderate. So we're gonna take some questions now. And
so one minute there was I think she was first.
What do we do about lobbyist money in Washington? What do we do to get the money out of Washington that owns all of our senators and House representatives? They won't do anything without their approval.
Money has overrun our government almost entirely. And as someone who's running for president, I can tell you flat out that your incentives end up heading in a certain direction. So even a well-intended legislator becomes bought and sold relatively quickly in our current system. So here's how you fix it. You pass a democracy dollars bill where you say every American gets $100 that you can give to any candidate or campaign, only to a candidate or campaign, use it or lose it every year. And then we would wash out the lobbyist money by a factor of 4. And so if you're a legislator and I get 10,000 South Carolinians behind me, that's $1 million. And then if the lobbyist comes and says, hey, I've got a $50,000 check for you, you'd be like, I don't care about your $50,000 check. I'm getting $1 million from the people. The problem if you're a legislator is that you end up just following the money because you think you're going to get reelected using the money. And so you end up with two constituents, people and the money. And the people, you kind of know it's important, but the people sort of hard to figure out and measure, whereas the money is so clear. It's like you actually know how much they gave you. You know, like, and that's, so again, in many ways, it's about trying to align the system. If we pass a democracy dollars bill, then all of a sudden legislators will be much more responsive to the people. That's a much more effective solution than trying to get corporate money out of politics, because we know it's always going to find a way to sneak back in. You have to wash it out. Wash out the system. That's the plan.
Good idea.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it too. And it was a derivative of someone else's idea. One thing I'm very open about is that we'll take great ideas from anywhere. Yes, Miss.
Okay, well, we here are on the front lines of climate change because we live on an island, we're dependent on tourism. We try to ignore it because it's bad PR, but really we're very concerned about climate change. So could you please talk about what you're going to do about climate change?
Thank you. I think you saw the last debate. All right, so you remember like my sort of doomsday climate change answer? And I was fascinated by the fact that I apparently had taken a third position in U.S. politics. Position number 1, we need to fight climate change. Position number 2, climate change isn't that big a deal. And then my position, like number 3 is like, how would I say it? It's like, it's worse than you think. I'm in the it's worse than you think camp, based upon the numbers. You probably saw Greenland is melting at the rate projected for 2050 today.
Yeah.
The UN just came out with a report and said, we're going to be okay if 90% of us go vegetarian immediately. Well, these are real data points, real scientists. So if you look at these studies, you're like, well, I don't think that 90% of us, I don't even like, it wasn't even US, it was 90% of the world has to go vegetarian immediately. So you look at these studies and they're really depressing. I've been digging into the science on the positive side. We're going to come out with a comprehensive climate change proposal 10 days from now or so. See examples, like you have to plant a lot of trees. If you planted a lot of trees, it would actually help matters significantly. And there's something you can do that's the equivalent of planting trees in the oceans. Right now, the Atlantic Ocean is losing between 4 and 8% of its biomass a year. Think about that. I mean, that's terrifying. So what we have to do is we have to essentially reforest the ocean by setting up marine permaculture arrays with kelp. And then you can end up rehabitating certain parts of the ocean. The ocean's not like just a uniform, you all know this, but it's not like just a uniform body of water. And then if you go into primary care, you get paid less, so you say, hey, let me specialize and get paid more. And if you go to a rural area, you get paid less. So let me go someplace urban and, on the coast and get paid more. So you end up with a shortage of doctors nationally and an extreme shortage in rural areas in particular. So then you go to the doctor lobby and say, hey, there are no doctors in this area. 30% of the country is a primary care desert. It's a massive problem. How about we let these nurse practitioners see patients? And what do you think the doctor lobby says? Yeah. Oh, right. So these are some of the constraints on our healthcare system that we need to try and loosen over time, in large part because technology is going to make it so that a nurse practitioner with an AI that frankly can like diagnose the vast majority of things based upon the listed symptoms, can do a whole lot. And then if you want, you can have a doctor beam in with telemedicine and just like start talking through the screen. Like there are different things you can do. But we need to start changing the economic incentives, because right now our healthcare system is not designed to maximize our health. What's it designed to do? Maximize revenue.
For insurance
It is.
Yeah, for insurance companies.
And one of the ways you know, there's a Cleveland clinic in the Midwest where the doctors are paid salaries and it doesn't matter what they prescribe. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, like treatments go down, the procedures go down. Like they're just like, ah, you're okay, you don't need it. And if a doctor is getting paid on the basis of procedures, they're like, oh, I think you need a procedure.
Yeah.
And then the entire system is designed that way. So we have to try and change the incentives. We have to try and get the access up. One thing that's a point of confusion about this, whenever people talk about how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to pay for it, that's the wrong question to ask. Because we're spending 18% of GDP on our healthcare right now, the worst results. And I have a private investor friend who said she's gone through the numbers. She's brilliant. She's gone through the numbers, and she says she has never seen profiteering like the profiteering she sees in the drug companies, the device companies, private insurers. She says like it's unlike anything she's ever seen in any industry ever. And so she's now shorting those companies and now backing my presidential campaign. Because she says you're gonna get this waste out. So when we talk about like where are we gonna get the money, it's like there's so much money pumping through that system right now that if we can channel it and make it more efficient even slightly, we can get the access up and the cost down.
Any last question? All right, y'all. So we got time for one last question. Then we gotta. I know some of y'all gonna want some pictures. Maybe somebody else
take some pictures.
So and then we gotta get out of here to the next spot in about 10-15 minutes. So we got time for one last question.
All right. I have a soft spot also for people in the front. Oh wait, well we'll do two. Him and you. All right. Wait.
Oh, good.
So the question was about gun control and what we can do about it.
What?
Gun control. Yeah.
8-year-old? 10-year-old?
So I'm aligned with the other major candidates in the fact we need sensible gun safety legislation in this country. We certainly need rhetoric that doesn't incite people to violence. We need to loosen the stranglehold that the NRA has on our legislature by putting democracy dollars into people's hands and then washing that money out. But if you look at gun violence, to me, we're focusing on the last two actions in the chain, which are I buy the gun or I have access to the gun and then I use it in a terrible or catastrophic way. And there are so many links in that chain that precede those moments. And so to me, the challenge is to try and attack the causes at every stage. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about trying to make families stronger. I'm trying to have it so that kids grow up in a less stressful and traumatic environment and have an opportunity to actually learn. I'm talking about having schools that don't marginalize and alienate kids who have different neurological and learning profiles. And one of my sons is autistic, and so I'm very passionate about that. I'm talking about having an economy where people can feel like they have a path forward, and that even if they're not like a coder or whatnot, that that there's like something waiting for them that they can be excited about, and maybe they can do work that they value. And then, yeah, we have to make it harder to get automatic weapons. But there's like this focusing on the last two elements of the chain. The reality is that there are over 300 million firearms in this country, and no matter what law we pass, there will still be over 300 million firearms in this country. So we need to have a perpetual buyback of guns. We have to make it so it's like, hey, anytime you want to trade in your gun, like we'll give you the market value. And you know what gun owners will do? They'll take their cruddiest gun that they're like, this gun barely works, and then they'll like trade that in for money, and they'll be like, I pulled one over on the government, and we'll be like, sure. Who's trying to reduce the supply of guns? The other thing we can do is we can actually make it so that guns are personalized to the owner through the grip. So it's not fingerprint, it's just the dimensions of their hand and the pressure. And then if that gun falls into your child's hand or someone else's hand, then it won't do any harm. And for a gun owner, it's a quality upgrade because they'll feel like James Bond. Yeah. I'll name it. I don't know if they name their guns now. I don't know the answer. All right.
Oh, yeah. This is not a policy question, but when you become our nominee, how do you handle Donald Trump in the debate?
debate Donald Trump because I'm like ice to his fire. Where he's all bluster and insults, and I'm all fact, reason, solve the problem. I'm very hard, and humor. I'm very hard to offend. So I think one mistake that Democrats make is that Donald Trump's like, I'm a jerk, like, you know, and then the Democrats' response is like, you know, stop being a jerk, or and then unfortunately between those two portraits, like, you know, like one seems somehow more authoritative than the other. And so my goal is not to respond in kind. My goal is just to make it seem ridiculous, just to make him seem like what he is. I'm very confident we're going to beat Donald Trump, in large part because his act has just gotten tiresome for many, many Americans.
My God.
It's exhausting, and most of us are exhausted. We just want to change the channel to something a little more uplifting, sane, like cool, rational. So the line about I'm the opposite of Donald Trump, an Asian man likes math, there's a lot of truth to that. Like the pendulum does swing the other direction. It's going to end up swinging my way. But I will defeat Donald Trump very soundly, in large part because I'm actually talking about the same problems that he was talking about in 2016. If you remember in 2016, here was the general narrative. You're struggling, we're going to make America great again. And then what did Hillary say? It's already great. America's already great. And then we lost. The narrative I have is not America's already great. The narrative is like, these are not the problems, these are the problems, and here's a better set of solutions. This is one reason why I'm drawing in Trump voters. Because a lot of Trump voters felt alienated by the Democratic Party because they didn't think the Democratic Party was talking about their problems. I'm talking about the same problems, but $1,000 a month makes more sense to them than the Donald Trump, build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. On some level, many Trump voters know that none of this stuff was really happening. And so when I come along and say, hey, the problems were real, but instead we have to turn the clock forward. We have to advance. We have to start evolving the way we see work and value. And because of that, I get like I'm one of only 2 candidates that 10% or more of Trump voters said they would vote for.
Here, here, baby. That's right.
And as you know, if you do any math at all, you know that's all we need to win. If I am your nominee, I will defeat Donald Trump soundly in 2020, and that's a promise.
Here. I know Mr. Yang is going to talk to some of you all and take some pictures. He's going to be back up here in the front. If y'all can kind of like be a little organized with sort of a line or something like that, that would be great instead of crowding people around.
Hey, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this in a favor. We have a lot of volunteers here to help set up the room. Good luck. And I'm going to ask you to take your chairs, those of you who have time, take your chairs and just stack them together so that when the Democratic volunteers put them up there easier. Thank you. Mark the line right here.
Yummy, 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 yummy.